Well, it's 10:30. I want to welcome everybody. Thanks. There's a lot of people that are showing up. Thanks for joining us at the Rural Life Virtual Summer Institute. I'm going to read this part because all these different names of the different sessions kind of get me. I want to welcome you to the Personalized Learning with Ed Tech, Empower Every Voice with Flipgrid. My name is Allison Seeley, and I'm going to be your host during this session. And if you have any kind of technical questions or anything like that, feel free to ask me in the chat, and we're going to go over some Zoom things with you in a few minutes. Brooke Drennan is the actual leader in this presentation, and she's going to take over in just a few minutes. The only other thing I would ask you is to please leave your microphones on off. If you want to ask a question, ask it in the chat, and we'll try to go ahead and address it. At the very end of the session, I'm going to drop a link to a survey, and for you guys to get credit, there's a timestamp on it, so you'll need to go ahead and fill out the survey now so we'll know which session you attended by the timestamp. But that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up in the chat and I'll answer them for you. So I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Brooke Drennan, and you can go ahead and start. Thanks for showing up.
Thanks, Allison. Welcome, everyone. I'm really glad to see you today. I see some familiar faces and some new faces. So I'm really excited to get the learning started. There are a couple of things that we need to go over first. Like Allison said, just some things about Zoom. The mute button you'll see down at the bottom if you're in full screen. So just make sure that you have that red line there and you are on mute. You can click to mute and unmute yourself. Also, we would love to see your face. So if you'd like to turn your video on, you can do that down here at the bottom with the little camera. And one other important thing, the chat, which we'll be using today for any questions and for interaction, is here. Down at the bottom, you'll see a little thought bubble with 3 dots. So anytime that you have a question or at certain points, you'll see it's a gold slide with a question on there to respond in the chat. Just go there and enter your question or your comment for engagement. And the last thing is, if you're in full screen mode, you can hit escape on your keyboard and that will take you out of full screen. We will be going to visit the Flipgrid website, so you will have to do that if you're using the same device. And if you're going to use a mobile device for that part, just you will have to have the Flipgrid app downloaded on your mobile device. So are there any questions about Zoom before we move forward? All right. So another just housekeeping thing is we have access to the materials on the website, on our Virtual Summer Institute website. You'll see the session name and then a link for view materials. So the Google Slides from today and also a list of resources. And another resource I created for you, which is called an app task challenge that we'll talk about later, are all there for you. And next we'll just get into our goals for the session. We'll get into the basics of Flipgrid and getting started with that, but first I think it's really important to discuss the instructional decisions that we make every day as educators regarding EdTech in general. So what apps we choose to try, what purposes they fulfill, and how they engage our students and affect their learning and achievement. For that, we're going to look at the Samara Model, a framework designed to help us reflect on how we integrate technology and teaching into our teaching and learning. And then we're going to dive into Flipgrid and think about how we can use that to engage our students in rich learning experiences. And finally, be able to design a task for students using Flipgrid that targets those higher order thinking skills and really impacts their achievement. And we'll focus our learning around one essential question today. Empower every voice is Flipgrid's motto, and it's one that we here at Rural Life really love because it addresses the importance of making sure every student has a voice, that they're heard, and they feel like what they have to say matters. Today we're going to talk about how using digital tools like Flipgrid paired with high quality instruction can empower and engage your students So please just keep this essential question in mind as we walk through the basics of using the tool, and keep this at the forefront. And since we're focusing on empowering student voice, I wanted to start by just thinking about those voices that we often don't hear in the classroom. So earlier, well, I guess last week I sent you guys an email and asked you to participate in our Rural Life Grid and answer the question, which voices do you think are inadvertently silenced in the typical classroom? And we received many great responses on there. I hope that you've had time to check that out and listen to others and respond to others. And if you haven't had the opportunity to do that yet, maybe you can check that out later today. But just, we had a really good conversation going on there. I'd like to take some time and just reflect on that. And I know, looking at my own practice over the years, there are voices that may have been overlooked in my classroom despite my best efforts. So we'll just be thinking about how we can use tools like Flipgrid to make sure that doesn't happen, that we are including every voice. So if you didn't get the chance to participate, now's your chance, because in the chat, I'd like you to just reflect on this. If you did look at the grid and listen to others, I'd like to know, what trends do you think stood out? So what are we noticing about the voices that are missing? And if you didn't have a chance to share yet, make your voice heard and let us know, what voices do you think are missing in the typical classroom? And this is a slide that you'll see anytime that you're going to participate in the Zoom chat. So you can just go down to the bottom, open up your chat, and type your response. So again, what voices do you think are missing? Or what did you notice just as a general takeaway from our discussion, if you had a chance to listen to others' responses on Flipgrid? And we'll give you a minute to gather your thoughts and share those in the comments. So yes, we
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. So we saw that a lot of people noticed that shy students, those that are unsure of their answers. Yes, Jessica, those who are lacking confidence, they might have the right answer but do not share. Lots of people noticing those who aren't confident. Ginger noticed that ESL students are in this category, and that's definitely true. And we'll talk today about some features that may help with that, some features of Flipgrid. I also like that Pamela pointed out distracted students, whether home issues or at school. Oh, and Ed says maybe some of our good students, because they don't want to be viewed as know-it-alls. And that's very true. So maybe they don't want that focus and attention. And Kay mentioned students with different opinions. And it can be kind of scary to speak out when you know that a lot of people aren't going to agree with you. So yes, definitely. So I see those responses are still rolling in. I love this discussion that we've started, and I hope that today we can see some different features of Flipgrid that will help us to facilitate a more inclusive classroom discussion. So thank you for all of your responses there. Again, you can visit the grid and keep the conversation going. and respond to one another. That's a huge part of using the discussion on Flipgrid. So whenever I consider using a new tech tool, and I just love using tech in the classroom, and sometimes I have to kind of like control myself and think about like, okay, you can't try everything. So what are some main reasons why you want to try to implement this tool? So I often think about three things: the why do I need this tool? The tool itself, the features, and then also my instructional focus. So what do I want my students to get out of this? And now that we've heard from teachers about voices that we think are missing, I think it would be really nice to hear from students about why they feel that student voice matters. So we have just a short video clip here from Flipgrid. And we'll go ahead and hear what some students have to say about this.
Hey, John, isn't there a way you can make it to where we hear the volume better?
There is. Brooke, when you did the screen share, there's that little box that says share my computer sound.
Make sure you shared the computer sound when you shared the screen. If you need to unshare the screen, just unshare it real quick and make sure you check that box. That's all you got to do. You know, just stop screen sharing and share it again.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys. I can actually.
There you go.
There.
I think it's important to have a voice because it means that we get to speak up. It gives you a chance to speak your mind.
Sometimes, like, not everyone's heard and everybody has an opinion.
We can inspire other people, show the world who you are, and you get to share your ideas and you get to say what you want.
Student voice matters because they should be active participants in their learning.
We can help ignite their passions, build on their curiosity, and help them make an impact on their world.
Because everyone deserves a chance to be heard.
That is the power of student voice.
I'm Evan, and I have a voice. My name is Jocelyn, and I have a voice. I have a voice. I'm proud of my voice. You need to hear it.
Awesome, dude.
So I love a lot of things from that video. I love the boy at the end. I think that's so cute. We do need to hear it. And I love that. I think it was Evan who said, you get to choose what you want to say. And I think that middle school students, that's something that they're all hungry for. They don't have a lot of control over what they get to say and do. But they're really ready for that. So they want to speak out. They want us to know who they are. And I think that this is a good tool to help them do that. And I'm really wondering how many more students can we reach with technology? So how many more students are going to be willing to speak out if they don't have to stand up in front of 30 other people to do that? If they just have to sit at their computer screen and they get unlimited retakes, which I really appreciated. I don't know about you guys, but when I went in to record that, it had been a while since I recorded a Flipgrid video. So I really appreciated the unlimited retakes, which I don't have the luxury of today, so just bear with me. But yes, when they can do those things, when they have a little more flexibility, we're going to be able to hear. I think that's pretty powerful. So we'll just focusing on student voice. Also looking at the research behind that. And Douglas Fisher and Nancy Frey say that it matters who's talking in class because the amount of talk that students do is directly correlated with their achievement. So we all know that middle school students love to talk in class and not always about what we want them to be talking about. But it's really important that they're talking when it matters, when they are making meaning of new content when they're discussing what they're reading with others and they're grappling with new ideas, when they're debating. That's when the effects of achievement really come into play. And in the same article that's linked here, they actually mentioned that in one study, in a higher achieving classroom, teacher talk was at about 55%. But in the lower achieving classroom, it was at 80%. So we see that sometimes when with lower achieving students, teachers are taking on and doing more of the talking, which is actually having a negative effect on their achievement. So how can we make it so that students are doing more of the talking in the classroom instead of teachers? And Flipgrid hopefully will help us do that. I'm not saying it's a cure-all by any means, but I think there are some features that are going to make some things much more doable. So we focus on the why, now the tool itself. What is it? If you haven't seen it, it's just simply a website that allows teachers to create grids that facilitate video discussions. Some of you have had the opportunity to get in there and play around with that, so you've seen it. It engages students in the conversation. There are a lot of features that students really find engaging. It's 100% free, which I know is one thing that all educators love. And it's simple to use, set up, manage. So we'll get into that a little later today. And the last thing that I like to focus on, other than the why and the tool itself, is just our focus. And here it's high quality instruction and technology integration. So we have so many tools at our disposal, and we know it's not about using the fanciest one, but just being aware of what's out there and picking the correct one for what our intention is for that lesson and for that day. So picking the right strategy and the right tool for that. To help us think about that a little more, we're going to look at the Samara Model today, which is a framework that helps us decide how to use technology in the classroom. We know as educators for years we've been talking about incorporating technology and actually doing that, but we need to think about how we're doing that in a meaningful way. So today we're going to use the Samara Model to guide our thinking and reflect on how to best implement tools such as Flipgrid. Some of you may be familiar with this model already. For some of you, this might be brand new. So I just have a short introductory video. It's like 2 minutes. It sums up the basic model, just to give you an overview of what it is. And we'll talk about it briefly. But again, our focus today is going to be on Flipgrid. I just really like to look at this framework and see how we can use tools like Flipgrid, keeping in mind our intent of high quality instruction. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this video first time around. As you're watching the video, please consider how you're currently integrating tech into your classroom, into your own lessons, according to this model.
Technology has the power to transform student learning. But what happens when it doesn't? What happens when that class set of iPads is nothing more than a class set of really expensive digital worksheets? The Samara Model tackles these issues with a focus on the intersection of technology and pedagogy. This model has 4 different layers, the first 2 focusing on enhancing the learning task, while the next 2 layers focus on actual transformation. With substitution, the technology acts as a direct substitute with no significant change. So a student typing an essay on a computer is merely swapping out paper for a laptop. With augmentation, the technology acts as a substitution with some functional improvement. So that same essay is now done on a Google document with the ability to have classmates leave comments on one another's work. With modification, technology allows for significant task redesign. So that same essay is now a blog post. Students are doing research online, editing on a shared document, and publishing to an authentic audience. It is no longer an essay. It is an article crafted for the world. With redefinition, the technology allows for new tasks that were previously inconceivable. So that same essay is now a multimedia package. Students are not only researching online, but connecting with experts through video conferencing. They are co-writing their posts with a digital blogging cohort from around the world. And they are producing not only a blog post, but also a corresponding podcast and an edited video. Notice that the higher up you move through the Samara model, the more transformative the technology task becomes, both in terms of multimedia content creation and in terms of communication with the rest of the world.
All right, so just taking a second to recap that, because I know that was pretty quick. There are 4 levels of integration according to the Samara model, and those are substitution and augmentation, and modification and redefinition. And as we move up the model, we move from enhancing learning with tech to transforming it and making the impossible possible. And in order to think about that, I really like this graphic from Jacqueline Stevens that compares the Samara model to a swimming pool. So we have substitution and augmentation over here in the shallow end, and then we have modification and redefinition in the deep end. And there's this popular idea that's connected to Samara, which is teach above the line, referring to the line between here, between enhancement and transformation. A lot of people like to connect this model to Bloom's taxonomy. So thinking about the further up you get on the Samara model, the further up you go on Bloom's. But we need all levels of Bloom's, just as we need to use all levels of Samara. And we know that as educators, it's really more about swimming laps and not actually reaching a finish line. So sometimes we need our students to be able to recall those facts before they can synthesize or create. Just as sometimes all we really need tech for is to allow our students to type that essay in a Google Doc so that we don't waste our lives trying to decipher that 6th grader's messy handwriting. But sometimes we're more concerned with what else the tech is going to make possible. So, such as collaboration, integrating content and ideas in multiple formats, and sharing their ideas with the world. So looking at one specific tool like Flipgrid, you can see multiple uses for the tool. You can see uses for substitution, just to purely substitute a written response with a verbal response. But then also, as you begin to do more and allow your students to do more with the tool, maybe to connect with others, to respond to their ideas, to show things in a new way, then you're really swimming over into the deep end. So we're going to talk about all those multiple uses today and the ways in which we can use Flipgrid. But I just wanted to start with that discussion of the framework just to get us thinking about, we have all of these great tools out there. We have all of these things at our disposal, but how are we using them in the most impactful way for our students? That's a lot to take in, but I think if you just boil it down to 3 essential questions that I actually pulled from this article that's linked here in your resources. It's just a really insightful article about the Samara model and in response to some current events and how we've been teaching digitally, some of us for a couple of months now, just thinking about that. How can your lesson be improved using technology? How you're able to engage and empower more students through technology, and how online learning can more closely resemble the authentic real-world learning that we're doing in our classrooms, especially if we wind back up in a situation in which all of our learning or most of our learning must take place online. Hopefully that won't happen, but with knowing that that could be a possibility, what can we do with the tools at our disposal to help those digital classrooms more closely reflect our real world classrooms? And I saw online a lot of feedback that teachers were giving about Flipgrid being an invaluable tool during this time, because they actually were able to use that and see their students' faces and have some of that class discussion that they would otherwise be missing out on. So I'd like to just pause now and consider where we currently are with using tech in our classrooms, especially in relation to the Samara model. So I'd like to know, how are you currently engaging and empowering your students through technology? Again, you can use the chat just to share your ideas. So what are some ways in which you're in your classroom now engaging and empowering your students through technology? So feel free to just share those ideas in the chat. So Kristen says that she's seen many teachers in her building using technology through the modification portion, utilizing blogs. That's a great idea. Angie says that she uses mostly Google Classroom for everything. I love Google Classroom. I was just 100% Google when I was in the classroom. Kay says she doesn't feel that we're using all the resources. Good, so you're opening up, maybe using a little more tech this year. Oh yeah, Paige, I like Edpuzzle. I haven't used that myself, but I've visited a classroom and saw some students using Edpuzzle. I thought that was a really neat way to have students interacting with videos. Great, so we have some really great ideas. I wish I could share all these. I'm gonna save the chat so I can see these because you guys are giving me great ideas here. And maybe I can share the chat, and I don't know, John, maybe I can share it with everyone. Is that possible? We'll look into that. But lots of great ideas. I love the idea about using Google Meet for fluency activities. I think you can see you can use Flipgrid for that as well. So we'll talk about that today. Just so many great ideas. Leanne says we wouldn't have been able to continue these last few months without technology. And I know that that was so true for a lot of people, and also a struggle for a lot of you whose students didn't have that connection at home. So awesome, thank you. So it looks like that you guys are doing a lot already with engaging and empowering your students through technology, and really, how can we not? Because we have just so many new things and tools at our disposal. So really looking at how we're using those in the most effective way. And moving forward with that in mind, with Samara in mind, and with student voice in mind, let's take a look at our featured tech tool, which is Flipgrid, which I'm sure you're all here to learn more about. So in this portion of the session, we're just going to dive into the tool, and I'm going to show you some of the basics for getting started. I don't think I'm going to have time to cover everything today, but I will just cover some of those essential things that you need to know to get started. There are so many resources that you can find online to help you if there's some specific thing that you're struggling. In fact, I think I might have overshared on the resources. I have a tendency to do that. So when you look into our folder, there are so many things like great videos, articles, just there's a whole ebook for educators. So I'll show you how to access all of those resources. But I just wanted to do an initial walkthrough of those of those essential things to get started. Basically, if you haven't used it before, you can get started with Flipgrid in about 5 minutes. All you need to do is create a grid after you create your account, of course, which I hope most of you have done at this point. You're going to create a grid. I'm going to show you how to create your first grid, which is where your students are going to interact. You're going to post your videos and topics. And it's basically just a personal learning community for a staff, a school, anyone. So you're going to set up a grid for whatever group you want. It could be a class period. It could be special groups within your classes. It could be a whole grade level if you wanted all of your classes to be able to interact. Within the grid, you're going to add topics, which are your discussion prompts, themes, and challenges for your grid community to respond to. And there are all kinds of things that you can attach to those that we're going to take a look at today. And then after that, after you have your grid and your topics there, all you have to do is have your students share by responding to those topics and capturing the videos. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to exit out of my slides and I'm going to actually go to the website. So you can stick with me and just watch my screen, and I'm going to walk you through some of the basics. And also try to highlight some features that allow for personalization of learning and some tips and tricks. If you want to hit escape now and open up a new tab, if you like to follow along and be able to do those things as we're working, you can also do that. So you can hit escape to exit your full screen on Zoom and then just open a new tab and go to flipgrid.com. But if technology already in itself, maybe this is your first time on Zoom, like it's a little overwhelming for you, you can just stick with me and I'll show you everything on my screen, and then hopefully you'll have some time later to play around with that yourself. So we're just going to flipgrid.com, and this is just their basic homepage. And you can see up at the top, you have the, sorry, I've got to move my Zoom bar out of my way. Wherever I put it, it's in the way. So you've got to log in with your educator login. And if you don't have that yet, you can just click sign up and you can sign up pretty quickly. One thing I want to point out before I do that though, is this is also the place to find those resources I was talking about. If you click on the resources link there on their homepage, you're going to see their tutorials, which I'm sure are much better than mine because they designed this tool. You can see the Getting Started guide that they put out for educators, as well as some step-by-step guides for remote learning. If you're still, I don't know if anyone's still doing that this summer. I don't know if schools are employing remote learning for summer school or not, but if that's still going on, you can check that out, or maybe some ideas just in case. And there's also some Flipgrid PD that are live, or they have links to pre-recorded ones as well. One thing that I really love on this resources page, and I think I'll show you those just a bit later, are the integration docs that they put out for educators. And those are just like grade level, subject level specific resources for how you could integrate Flipgrid in your classroom. So there's one for middle school science, middle school art, middle school ELA. So we could check those out a little bit later. But that's just the resources page. And again, you can get to that by going to their main website, flipgrid.com. And to log in, you simply just do your educator login, and mine's already saved to log in. So there we are. You can see my page. These are my grids. You can see all of the grids that I have set up here, including our rural life grid, which I set up for you. And these are like my classes. So if I were teaching 6th grade ELA, I might have one for each class period. But you can have an unlimited number of grids. So you could also create grids for working within your class period. So working with groups of students. If students are working on a project together, you could create a grid just for them. But I'm going to show you how to add a new grid. It's super simple. You just click on that pink Add New Grid, and you have a name for your grid. So maybe mine might be ELA first period. Sorry, they're mowing outside if you can hear that. The best time. So ELA first period. And then you have a couple of different options when you are setting up your grid for your students. You could do that either by school email if your students use school email accounts, such as school Gmail or school Microsoft accounts. That's probably the most popular option for choosing when you're setting up a grid. If your students do not have emails, and especially if you're working with a lot of people who work with younger students, like to use the student ID option. And that's, you can just create a list of student IDs and allow students to join your grid that way. And then the way that I set ours up, which was just educator learning community, and that's a public grid that we can share with people in our network. That's also a reason why I set, and I'll show you this later, but I'm set in my management so that I had to approve the comments because I shared that publicly and I was sharing that link on a public website. I was a little afraid of Flipgrid bombers. Like, I don't know if you've heard about Zoom bombers, but it's a real thing. So when those public links are out there, that's just something to think about. So you might want to have to approve the comments before they go on. So I'm just going to show you school email. If you have a school email, you can set your grid up that way. And then it gives you a flip code. And you can also modify that flip code. So I changed ours to NFRL for Nice Longer Foundation Rural Life 2020. So you could change that to whatever you want or just take the one that they assign you and simply hit next. And they're going to ask you, since I chose the school email option, what the domain is for your students' emails. So if your school emails ends, like my school ended in @HancockCountySchools.com, you would just enter that in there, and anyone with a @HancockCountySchools.com email can access your grid. And if your school has multiple emails for educators and students, you need to enter all of those in. And then you simply hit next and your grid is ready. So you can share it now, or you can go to your grid. We'll take a look at it. And there are multiple ways that you can personalize that, and I'm sure you can get into all of that. You can change the picture here, and if you mess something up, you can always go over to the pencil and edit it. But the next thing that I wanted to show you is how to create a topic within that grid. So your grid is like your class, and then your topics are going to be your assignments. Those are your prompts to get students beginning their discussions. So you'll just go to add new topic, just like you went to add new grid. You'll need a title for the assignment. And then you have 1,000 characters that you can use for your prompt. You have different tools here that you can use. And that's just what you're typing out, your instructions for students. I think they just recently updated that to 1,000 characters. So educators were really excited about that because they were more limited before. And you can modify the recording time that students have. So if you want them to have anywhere between 15 seconds and 10 minutes, you can set that. 15 seconds would be a short time. I also noticed that I set hours to 1 minute and 30 seconds, and I ran out of time as I was talking. So that's just something to think about. How much time do you want students to have? And then the moderation is what I was talking about. So if you want to be able to view those videos before they're activated for the whole class to see, you'll need to turn that on here by hitting that toggle button. So like I said, I did that because I was sharing the link out publicly, so I just wanted to make sure everything was appropriate that was shared on the site. You know, depending on the culture of your classroom and how clear your expectations are and how your students are, you may want to turn that on or off. We know middle school students can get a little silly sometimes. So that's there for you, so you don't have to stress about inappropriate things being shared for your whole class. And then the last thing here on the basics of setting up a topic are, which gives you a lot of options. I think the focus that I added for you was just an image that was a support for how to record a video. And so that's somewhere where you could post something like an anchor chart, just so to give your students a reminder of what they're focusing on. You could also just post something fun to catch their attention. You can add videos. You can connect this to other apps, do an app smash, like pair this with a Nearpod or a Kahoot. So you have a lot of options there for changing your topic and making that your own. So I've gone over how to make a grid and how to make a topic, the basics. There are more options there, but I don't want to throw too much at you at one time. So if I'm going too quickly, or if you have questions, now's the time to let me know. So any questions at this point about the basics of setting up a grid or making a topic? Do you want me to go back over anything? Just add it in the chat.
Hey, Brooke, I'm just curious. Some of those things are new, the Kahoot and the Nearpod. Have you had a chance to try any of those? I mean, just the way they connect in?
Yeah, I tried linking a Nearpod, and I think, and there are a couple of ways that Nearpod and Flipgrid integrate together. One of them is that you can put a Flipgrid in your Nearpod. So if you're using a Nearpod site, you can actually integrate that Flipgrid. Here, I think if you add a Nearpod as your focus, then it gives your students those slides like that presentation so they can look at it and then respond in the grid. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So there are two different ways. And I'm also doing a Nearpod session week 3, I think, of the Virtual Summer Institute. So we may take a little advertisement. Maybe we'll take
a little plug in. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see how those work together. Wakelet's a
question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. We use Kahoot all the time. It's a great platform. But can we see other people's, you know, for example, can I see how someone else has done theirs? Because you're giving us the basics. There are people out there that are really, they're killing it. They're doing a good job with it. Is there a way to see other people's?
Yes, like other people's Flipgrids.
Uh-huh.
Yes, absolutely. We'll take a look at some of those in just a minute. Now, I don't know. I don't have any access to any with like actual responses, but we can see some that are set up.
Okay, thank you.
It's a great question. Any other questions? Yeah, and feel free to unmute yourself and just ask the question because I'm having trouble finding my chat box anyway on here. Thanks. Okay, so if we don't have any questions about creating new topics and grids, I'm just going to go in and show you what the grid actually looks like. So I'll show you our Rural Life grid that I set up. So you can see my topics here, the list of the topics that I have set up. And if I wanted to view those as a student, I can. Or if I want to go in as the educator and manage that grid, I can do that here. So there are several options. I can make it inactive, hidden, and go in and see your awesome responses. And those are all of the ones that we received today on our topic of student voice. And this is the student view. So this is what students are going to see when they get on there. And something that I wanted to show you about the student view that I think is a feature that really is going to help a lot of students is the immersive reader. And so once I have that prompt for my students, their directions, I could pretty much enter anything there. And something I didn't show you is that I could also go to more options there and include attachments. So I could include videos, I could include text for them to read or websites for them to visit in response to the prompt. But I can use this immersive reader feature. Lots of websites have this. This comes standard on Flipgrid, and you can actually, as a student, set your text preferences. So you can increase the size, do all kinds of things for accommodations. There are also even grammar options on here, so you can have this program highlight all of the verbs. So what does my teacher want me to do here? All the verbs are highlighted in red, and there are lots of different options that students have, but essentially this just reads for students.
Hello.
I'm wondering why it's not playing right away. Maybe with a second.
Hello, everyone. We're excited about kicking off Rural Life's Virtual Summer Institute with you.
So you can get the idea there of one way that Flipgrid allows you to reach some of those students who may be struggling otherwise. There's also a translate feature on there. There are lots of different things. So if you're interested in the accommodations, you can check that out for sure. And the last thing on the basics that I wanted to show you is just how to share this with your students. So if I wanted to go back and view my grids, you can share this in a couple of different ways. You can share the whole grid, or you can share the individual topics with students. If you want to share the whole grid, you would just click here. And you can either copy and paste the link anywhere you want, send it straight to your Google Classroom or your Microsoft Teams, share it on Remind, or you can also use the share QR code. You can copy and paste that into whatever you want, or you can download it and share it however you want. So there are just a few options for sharing for your students. And if you participated in the grid, the Getting Started grid, then you saw how easy that was from the student side. That's another reason that I set that up for you ahead of time, is just so that you could see that student view and see all of the ways you could use that and just how easy it was to access that. One thing about Flipgrid is students do not create accounts, only teachers create accounts. So the way that they're accessing the grid is through the code that you share with them. Any questions about sharing? And I wanted to show the video features for you, just in case you hadn't had a chance to look at those, and just talk about how those help with personalization. But I can't get both the video and my Zoom to work at the same time. But I did create a little video for you, and I posted that as an extra attachment. So if you're interested in looking at those student video features, you can go on to this grid that we have set up to our student voice and introductions topic. And there's an attachment there called video features. And that just is a screencast of me using the video as a student and looking at all of the different things like filters, the whiteboard feature that takes away the video, just in case your students are super shy about showing their faces. They can just use a whiteboard and just have their voice going over that, and add things like stickers or other images. Your students can even upload an image, draw on that, and talk over it, so they don't actually have to show their faces at all. So that just shows you the student features. So going back to the question of can we see like what other people are doing with this, now that we've covered maybe some of the basics of how to get started, there are a couple of places that you can see some really great examples of how educators are using this really in an innovative way. One of them is the Disco Library. That's the short for Discovery. And that's just where tons of educators and different companies have shared their grids, so that you don't actually have to even create your own. You can just take one of these and modify it based on the topic that you're discussing. So for example, a site that I really love, Wonderopolis, has made lots of grids already, such as this one, Can Music Help You Think? And they're just linked to different articles on the Wonderopolis website. They have these wonders of the day, and it's just a really neat way to get students curious and thinking about questioning. And some of them are pretty basic. I mean, all they do here is just read the article and then respond to, does music help you think? And if so, what songs help you focus the best? And then you could begin that discussion based on the text. So have your students responding to a text-based article. If you wanted to use that, you would just simply just add it straight to your grid, and then you can modify it in any way that you want. There are thousands of these sample grids that people have shared. So you can pretty much just go on here and search. Let's say you're teaching science and you're teaching the parts of an animal cell. You can find multiple grids that people have already created for this and just kind of see the cool things that they're doing with that. I could think of ways that you could have students just upload an image there and talk about labeling, talk about the differences. There are all kinds of different things that you can do. It's also linked to things like Flocabulary if you're using that. Again, Nearpod, Epic. So anything that's in your Nearpod library, maybe you can find a Flipgrid to go along with that. There are just tons and tons of resources there. Conversation starters just to get the conversation started. So that's the Disco library, and you could spend probably days just exploring that. But just take a look.
Also go in and just search a Kahoot, like put in Kahoot or Nearpod, and it'll pull up examples for those of you who want to see how that's incorporated in. Does that make sense? So you wouldn't have to search like by subject or whatever. You can literally go in and Kahoot and hit search. So that way you could see some examples of how people are using them like that, sort of take it to the next level.
Right, like here's a Nearpod one. I just clicked on Nearpod and they have different things. So you can see this one's cells and it's just a matching pairs practice and review. So go through the attached Nearpod lesson and answer the questions to complete the matching pairs. And then they would add their response here on Flipgrid using commas. And I haven't looked at all of these, so I don't know how in depth they are, like how, like what the level is. But I did want to show you something that I think gives you some really good resources. And that's in that Flipgrid integration doc that I mentioned at the beginning. And I'm just going to go back there. So this is on the sign-in page under resources. Running low on time. So under resources, you can look at these integration docs, and those are the age specific and subject specific resources. So you can do those by subjects, grade levels, looking at the language arts, grades 6 through 8. Looking at the skills that you can cover, and then just different ideas how they would use this in an ELA classroom. So take a look at those. We're running a little short on time, so I don't have time to get into that, but we will have some time after the session to dig into this a little more one-on-one if you need a little extra help. But I would like to go back to our thinking about SAMR and Flipgrid and thinking about transforming learning. So some of those big takeaways, just thinking of this in relation to SAMR, evaluating your use of technology and designing tasks that target higher order thinking skills, engaging students in rich learning experiences and impacting student achievement. So as we saw, there are some pretty basic ways that you can use Flipgrid, but we want to be thinking about how can we use this for high quality instruction. So are the activities that we're designing on here actually beneficial for our student, and how are they impacting achievement? So we're not just putting it on here just because, just for fun, and spending unlimited time on stickers and selfies, but how are we actually using this as a tool to create change for our students, to transform or to enhance the learning experience? Looking at personalizing it, how are we using this tool? Like what features here just really allow us to customize the instruction for students. So what features are allowing us to gather student responses that are delivered at their own pace without them feeling like they're on the spot in the classroom? Or what features of this tool can make you more in tune with your students' needs, their progress, their personalities, thinking about learner profiles? How can we use this as an SEL tool to connect with our students on that level? Really, what are these student responses telling us about our students' progress, where they are in relation to the material that we've covered? So how can you use the data that you're getting from these response videos to adjust your instruction? And how is it going to help you know when students have mastered that content? How can you use the feedback tool more effectively? That's one thing that I didn't show you, but there's a standard feedback, and then there's you can create your own rubric on there. And I sent some of you feedback through email if you submitted a video. So how can you use that feedback tool to personalize the learning experience for your students? And I think something that Allison mentioned in her response video online is how can this make your classroom more flexible? And Allison mentioned the fact that she was filming her response in her pajamas, and that your class had the competition to see like who could post from the most crazy location over the summer when you were working on your doctorate degree, and using this as a tool for that class. So how can this make your classroom more flexible, and how can it help you build relationships with your students and get to know them on a more personal level? So hearing those voices that we wouldn't typically hear speak out on this platform. These are just a few of the ways that some teachers are using Flipgrid in their classrooms, as well as people using it with teachers. So looking at responses, letting them tell their stories or connect with characters. I really like the idea of doing a character vlog, like a video blog. And if you're going through a class novel, just having students keep up with the character and their perspective through a series of blog entries. Using it as a reflection, maybe as an exit ticket, so you get that formative data and see where your students are that day, and then you're able to plan your lesson for the next day. Using it as a brainstorming or collaboration tool, so that we can see that there are many, many uses here. You can go back in and check all of those out. We are running so short on time. The last thing that I wanted to mention is Grid Pals. And that's just where you can go and you can use this in a transformative way to connect with people from all over the world. And I really also like the idea of setting up a rural life Grid Pals, so that maybe if your classes are covering specific content, then you can connect with each other and have your students film and record responses that you're sharing between schools. So that's just one idea I had. For the reflection that we are not going to have time for, but if you would love to do this later, you can go back on and you can go back to our Rural Life Grid and just reflect on what's one way that you think that you could use this tool. So one task that you think you could create to enhance or transform an existing lesson plan or unit, and how do you think you could actually use this tool to empower students and give them voice? And I created a little app task challenge for you that's in the resources folder. It is a hyperlinked document. So everything on here that's underlined is hyperlinked. So that's in the resources folder for you. You just click on it and you can open up tons of videos and articles that will tell you a little bit more about how people are actually using it. And sorry if I didn't answer that question in the best way, but I had lots of things planned to show you that. So that's there. If you're ready to take some laps, I'll be here to support you by answering your questions after the session is over. But it's really important that we complete this survey. If you want to talk a little bit about that, Allison.
Yes, I went ahead and dropped it in the chat. And I was reminding everyone again, but I haven't typed it all the way out. But since we're pushed for time, I'll just tell you, remember that it's time-stamped. So you need to go ahead and complete the survey so you'll get credit for this specific course. I want to thank everybody for showing up. I hope this has been helpful. And again, Brooke and I both will stick around. So if you have any questions, if you want us to share our screens, or if you want to we can look at some other things if you want to see how you can take Flipgrid to the next level. Brooke, do you have anything else or?
No, I just really appreciate everyone. I can't believe how quickly that time went by for me. It might have struck by for some of you having to listen to me talk so much, but I do have a ton of resources to share with you. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me either here after the session or by email. I think my phone was attached to my email. So just, I would love to be here and be a support for you, throw you a flotation device if you want to try this out and you feel like you're not that comfortable. I would love to just tell you a little bit more about the tool and think about integrating tech with you. So thank you so much for showing up today.
Yeah, feel free to go ahead and log out if you want. We appreciate you coming. And Brooke and I will just hang out here for a little bit if anybody wants to stick around and ask any questions. So thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you. And just unmute yourself if you have a question and ask it now. This will just be super informal.
Okay, where does the link to be able to fill out the survey?
It's in the chat box.
Okay, thanks. I mean, okay, thanks.
You're welcome. I just dropped it again, so it's on there a couple times. And you guys can log out to complete this survey. It's just on Google Forms, so you can go ahead and complete it, but you don't have to stay logged in for that, unless you have a question about it. Brooke, I had no idea you could.
How do I log out? Just click leave?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Dunn.
you.
I didn't know you could link it to Kahoot. I'm excited to kind of go back and look at how you do that.
Yeah, they have opened up a lot of different ways that you can smash those apps together. And I haven't had a chance to play around with all of those, but as I was designing the Nearpod session, I did look at integrating a Flipgrid. So basically, how you can put any link in Nearpod and just take your students right there.
Right.
It just takes them directly to the grid to respond there.
In my head, when you were saying you could link it, like I was thinking like the other way around, and like, how does that work? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like I was thinking you would go from Flipgrid to Nearpod, not embed it in your Nearpod. I don't know why I was thinking that.
You could do both, actually. I mean, the one example that I showed, you can actually, as your focus,